So I heard you want to become a software engineer, maybe so you can travel the world while making multiple six figures. Well, in this video, I'm going to tell you how I became a software engineer without a computer science degree or a coding bootcamp. It was only actually when I graduated from my master's degree program in something completely unrelated that I decided I wanted to become a software engineer. And then 2 months later, I was starting my first software engineering job. So I'm going to tell you how I did that. But full disclosure, it's not as if I never coded in my life when I graduated. Had that been the case, it would have taken me, I imagine, at least 6 months to get that first job. I actually started off as a computer science major in undergrad and did a web development internship my freshman summer before deciding I wanted to pursue other things and switching to a math major, spending the next 4 years doing completely unrelated things. So when I graduated from that master's, although I'd spent the last 4 years pursuing completely unrelated career tracks, I had coded before and I did have that one internship, and I was basically one class short of a computer science minor in college. So I'm telling you this so that you have realistic expectations. It's going to take a lot of work and time, especially now given that it's gotten significantly more competitive at the entry level in software engineering. When it comes to software engineering interviews, there are basically two kinds of interviews that you'll get depending on the company. The first is the computer science fundamental, data structures and algorithms type interviews. All the top tier tech companies like the Googles and the Facebooks, those are the questions they're going to ask you, and they're basically just hiring you based off of how well you do on those interviews. Amazon, I think they ask some behavioral interviews and stuff, but by and large, you getting the job is a function of how well you perform on those interviews. Those interviews, although they're kind of absurd in my opinion, the beauty of them is that they can very much be practiced. You just have to put in the work. And when you study for one of those interviews, you study for all of them. So you could interview at any of those companies and they all have the same damn interview. The other kind of company is basically everyone else. And although they might ask you some of those questions, they're going to ask you more practical questions. Like for example, if it's for a full stack web development role with Node.js and React, they'll probably ask you some JavaScript questions, maybe give you a take-home coding assessment. If I were doing it now, I would just try to get a job at a top tier tech company, not because I care about like the personal prestige or whatever, or not even about the money, although the money is way better than some random startup. But just because it's going to make your life so much easier down the line. It's going to open so many doors. Even if you decide you want to go back to startup land, it's going to be easier to get the interview, it's going to be easier to get the job, and you're going to get paid more money for the same job just because most people hiring, they just find it safer if you have that ex-Google background on your resume. So the beginning of your career is when you're most driven to do interview prep because you have to, you don't have a choice. So you might as well direct that energy towards something that's going to maximize your ROI. I'm telling you from personal experience, the longer you're in this industry, the less energy and patience you're going to have to dedicate 3 months of your life to spending your after work hours and weekends on interview prep, which is basically what you have to do if you want to get a job at one of those top tier tech companies. Because the reality is the questions they ask, those data structures and algorithms questions, you almost never encounter those in the real world. I mean, I'm sure there are some exceptions, but generally, very rarely do you encounter that. So you're gonna have to devote a lot of time to interview prep. And when you can easily just get another similar job at another startup without having to do any interview prep, then the prospect of spending all that time on interview prep is just like, Also, as you get older, you might get like a girlfriend, a family, and you're just not gonna wanna spend your weekends like on interview prep. If I were starting now, I would just prepare for those interviews. You prepare for one of those, you're preparing for them all, and just try to get a job at one of those companies. And if you get rejected everywhere, that's okay. You can just get a job at some random company and try again in 2 years. Anyways, if it were now, I would try to get a job at a company like Google. But at that time, I thought, these computer science trivia question interviews are so stupid. I don't want to demean myself and become some monkey jumping through these hoops just so I can become some cog in the machine at some giant corporation. I want to work for startups and work on cool, exciting new things with cool people. And so that's the route I pursued. And so I wanted to be a full stack web developer. And so I figured, okay, I'm gonna pick a tech stack to learn, and I'm gonna build some projects so that I'll have a portfolio and then use that when applying for jobs, which will, one, show that I at least have some competency in that I was able to teach myself how to code and build this stuff and actually build it, but also that I'm driven enough to do that, and I'm serious about a career in software engineering despite not having pursued that for the last 4 years. So that's what I did, and I basically locked myself up in my bedroom for a month and did nothing but learn how to code, work on building these projects, and then I built some really crappy projects actually, this really hideous looking roommate matching website. But I built something, and then I started applying for jobs, got rejected so many times, but eventually I got an offer. And once you get that first job, your life just becomes so much easier, because being an engineer with 2 years of experience just puts you leagues ahead of an engineer with no experience. And of course, once you get your first job, that's just the beginning. There's maximizing your income and maximizing your career, which is a whole nother video. But if I were to just summarize it, I'll just say that if you want to maximize your income, you'll have to work for companies that value engineers. Tech companies, for example, are going to pay you a lot more than some random insurance company in the middle of nowhere. Also, even if you work at a high-paying tech company, you'll probably have to switch jobs every year or 2 or 3 if you want to maximize your income, just because the amount of money companies give in raises tend to pale in comparison to the amount of money you can make working for a competing company where they also up-level you in your offer. So what would I do differently if I were starting again today? Well, I already said I would definitely try to get a job at a top-tier tech company if I could, because it's going to make your life so much easier. It's going to be easier to get the interview, get hired, and you'll get paid more money for the same damn work. I mean, it sounds stupid, but it's the same saying as like, nobody ever got fired for buying IBM. I mean, a lot of the times the people doing the hiring, they're not really that technical. I mean, even if they're an engineering manager, maybe they haven't coded in 10 years, so they don't really know how to evaluate how competent an engineer is, and so they're relying on these brand names. I mean, if you didn't know anything about finance and you were hiring a financial advisor, who are you going to hire? The person who worked at Goldman Sachs or the person who works at Genworth Financial? Also, oftentimes the hiring managers and the CEO of the company are beholden to the investors, who are even more prestige whorish. So just trust me on this one, your life is going to be a lot easier if you get a job at a top-tier tech company. You don't have to stay there the rest of your life, but it's going to make your life easier. Of course, if you don't want to work at those companies or you get rejected at all of them, it's totally fine. You can definitely have a really good career without doing that. I just think it's going to make your life a whole lot easier, and that's what I would do differently if I were starting again today. Yeah, that's it. Let me know if you have any questions in the comments or want to make videos on other topics. I'll just say, if you're in the grind right now, just keep at it. All it takes is one yes. It's kind of like getting a girlfriend or a boyfriend. You can get rejected a million times, but all it takes is one yes. Best of luck. Let me know if you have any questions in the comments or want to make any videos on any other topics, and I'll see you in the next video. Peace.